I never thought much about what it would actually be like to be the smartest person alive until Sister Sage showed up in The Boys. The show quietly suggests that intelligence stops being a gift and starts becoming something much closer to a curse. Her mind operates on an entirely different level from everyone around her. Constantly processing information, it became much easier to understand why she often seems emotionally detached, sarcastic, dismissive, or simply exhausted. One of the saddest realizations I had while watching her was that she probably hasn't experienced genuine surprise in years. At first, that sounds incredibly empowering, but after enough time, it would also become unbearingly repetitive. How do you ever allow yourself to simply enjoy being around people instead of constantly analyzing them? I think that's why so many of her scenes carry this underlying sadness that isn't immediately obvious on a first viewing. The show also does something incredibly interesting by exploring how overwhelming that level of cognition would actually become. Rather than expanding her world, her intelligence seems to be shrinking it. Once uncertainty disappears, curiosity starts disappearing with it. That may be the greatest tragedy of Sister Sage's character. She has answers to questions that most people will never even think to ask, but those answers don't appear to bring her fulfillment. Sister Sage has effectively lost that access to that entire part of the human existence. The relationship she develops with Homelander illustrates this perfectly because, despite all of her brilliance, she's ultimately valued for what she can provide rather than who she is. That creates another painful contradiction within her character, because the smartest woman alive becomes indispensable while simultaneously remaining profoundly alone. There's also something deeply unsettling about how logic gradually replaces empathy in her worldview, because her ability to calculate consequences on such an enormous scale naturally changes the way she perceives suffering, and moral decisions slowly become optimization problems instead of emotional experiences. I don't think Sister Sage stops caring because she wants to. I think she reaches a point where her extraordinary perspective continuously pushes her further and further away from experiencing events on an ordinary human scale. It's difficult to emotionally immerse yourself in one person's pain when your mind is simultaneously calculating how that pain influences thousands of interconnected outcomes. Ironically, Sister Sage understands almost everyone around her better than they understand themselves, yet that complete understanding makes genuine participation increasingly difficult. Then we arrive at one of the most unforgettable aspects of her character, and honestly one of the boldest creative decisions the writers made throughout the entire series, because Sister Sage intentionally damages her own brain in order to temporarily escape herself. The first time that happened, I remember thinking it was simply a shocking visual or another example of how strange the boys can become, but the more I thought about it afterward, the sadder that entire idea became. Most superheroes desperately protect their powers because losing them would mean losing part of their identity, whereas Sister Sage willingly sacrifices hers because ordinary life has become something she can only briefly experience by making herself less intelligent. Those scenes aren't really about stupidity at all, they're about relief. She eats junk food because she's temporarily freed from analyzing every nutritional consequence, she laughs without evaluating the psychology behind the joke, and she experiences ordinary pleasures that most of us never think twice about. That's an incredibly heartbreaking idea because it suggests that ignorance, something we usually associate with limitation, has become a form of freedom she can never permanently possess. The irony couldn't be stronger because the only thing every genius supposedly wants, greater intelligence, has become the exact thing she wishes she could escape. The tragedy becomes even deeper once you remember that her brain regenerates, because the temporary peace she recreates for herself can never actually last. Every moment of silence eventually comes to an end, every calculation returns, every pattern becomes visible again. She's forced back into that same overwhelming existence, knowing full well she'll probably seek another temporary blackout. What fascinates me most is that Sister Sage isn't really defeated by another character throughout much of the show. Her greatest enemy is existing inside a mind that refuses to stop working. That's why I think she serves as such an interesting contrast to Ryan, because Ryan still possesses something Sister Sage lost a very long time ago, and that's the ability to genuinely discover who he wants to become. Ryan's future remains uncertain, his morality is still developing, and his relationships continue shaping him in unpredictable ways. Ryan represents possibility where Sage represents certainty, and by the end of the show, it seems to argue that the possibility is far healthier than certainty could ever become. Her story ultimately becomes less about intelligence and more about the importance of wonder. Once every mystery has been solved, every motive understood, and every outcome predicted, existence itself starts losing the qualities that make it worth experiencing in the first place. Her story isn't really warning us about the dangers of becoming too smart, so much as reminding us that knowledge alone has never been enough to sustain the human spirit. She may be the smartest person alive, but she's also one of the loneliest. That's one of the reasons I think she's become one of my favorite characters in The Boys, because beneath all the strategy and manipulation is a surprisingly human tragedy about isolation, purpose, and whether there comes a point where absolute knowledge starts taking more from us than it gives back. I'd love to hear where you all landed after watching the show. Do you think she's ultimately a villain, a victim of her own extraordinary abilities, or someone who exists somewhere in between? If you enjoyed this discussion and you'd like to see more deep dives, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.